Loving property and wanting to invest is just the first step. The real question now is, are you actually financially ready? Some brokers are just like waiters. They'll just take your order and take it to the back and then it's served up to you, when the reality is that person might have been sitting in front of them. Well, no, I actually wanted to buy 2 or 3 properties, but they've used all their servicing or most of their servicing on this one asset. And then they can't buy number 2 because they've left $200,000 or $300,000 on the table instead of being strategic with it.
It's very, very difficult to go to any major institution and get a loan if your credit score is below a certain figure. And then your only options then are going to second and third tiers, where you're paying higher rates, high fees, and you're seeking loans from third-tier institutions, which are the go-to institutions when you can't get funding from the majors.
What's the first step in being finance ready?
The first step of being finance ready is obviously...
Welcome back to the No B.S. Property Investing Podcast. In episode 2, we talked about setting your goals. But here's the thing. Loving property and wanting to invest is just the first step. The real question now is, are you actually financially ready? Because it's not just about the deposit. Lenders are looking at your whole financial picture, your income, your spending habits, credit history, and even how stable your job is. And even if the bank gives you the green light, you still need to ask, can I actually afford this in real life, not just on paper? So today, Mark and I are breaking down what financial readiness really means, what lenders are looking for, and how to structure your finance so you're not just buying one property, but setting yourself up to keep growing. So let's get into it. Mark, welcome back.
Thank you.
Always good to have you in the studio. And I guess I want to kick this off straight away. Yeah, the last time we spoke about the big picture, why Aussies love property, but let's get practical. What's the first step in being finance ready?
The first step of being finance ready is obviously having a deposit. Probably even before that is actually having a strategy and having the right people around you, like I mentioned in the last one, having the right people around you in regard to strategically understanding your end goals and what you're trying to achieve. And then to do that, there's obviously a few key things in regard to, you need a certain deposit, you need a certain income. We need to understand the market through someone like Ripehouse in regard to where we buy and what price point that is at. And then the bank or ALIC, our company, we'll go to a bank and check the serviceability, get the approval, check the income, check tenure of employment, check if there's any probation, check credit score, and then check that it is a risk that the bank or institution is comfortable to take on.
Okay, and I guess kind of touching on that in terms of your team, because I think that's the big one at the beginning, right? So you're being finance ready. A common mistake that I see is someone coming in, because you talk about a team, not everybody's going to use a buyer's agent, and that's completely okay. Lots of properties happen without a buyer's agent being involved. Not that I think that happens in the best way all the time. But a lot of people start, they'll jump online, maybe look at interest rates, or they'll just calculate what their budget is in terms of their monthly expenditure. The other one is that, are your partners aligned? Because you've got your money person, right? Whether that's an accountant, whether that's a broker, whether that's your dad or your mum who helps you with your tax. Like, would you say that's a big one in terms of making sure that you've spoken to your money person?
Well, they think they're finance ready because they went and got a loan. Most banks don't even assess the loan. They actually give an approval, which is a bit of paper that says at the bottom in fine print that we haven't checked X, Y, and Z. And technically, it's not an approval. I call it a Clayton's approval, the approval that you've got that you haven't got an approval. So that is in a lot of cases. So people think finance ready is that. It's not that. It's about getting a proper approval, getting a fully lodged application, going to a bank that does assess everything, about getting a structure right, getting a strategy right, making sure you're on the same risk profile, that if it's a joint venture partnership, that you're on the same page as your partner or your friend or whoever you're buying the property with. The mindset's right, the cash flow's right, the assets right, the market's right. To me, that's getting financial. That's getting ready to buy a property. So, which is a bit of a myth, like we spoke about myths in the last episode. There's another myth that we think finance approval is we're just going to the bank, got an approval in 5 minutes. Okay, that's not an approval, and it's definitely not getting you financially ready.
And that kind of leads me to the next question in terms of just getting the approval, which is always conditional, right? Like it's got little terms in there as well. They're not just going to throw money at you if you're going to go buy a dud asset or there's massive risk that
buy the shed up the road and there's, hang on, you gave me the approval. Or you told me your income was 100K. Well, most people can't read pay slips.
Yep.
So how a bank can, it's really a bit of a cop-out. So basically, our company, ALRC, will never, ever deal with banks who don't give proper approvals or do proper assessments, because it's really potentially a risk for the client.
And then kind of touching on that in terms of getting the approval, there's obviously things that lenders look at, right? And what are some of those big things that lenders look at and then can potentially be hurting, borrowing capacity or servicing? I know you don't really like to use the word borrowing capacity because that's almost a made up thing, right? Everybody can afford a certain thing if you've got the same income, but it doesn't mean what you can afford is the same.
Yeah.
But what are some of the items that they look at for servicing and what can impact servicing?
Well, it's about the employment side and how consistent it is. Okay, they're going to look at, which is obviously the critical part. Okay, most banks want to see 3 or 6 months worth of actual history in an account. It needs to marry up to the payslip. They want to see regular savings on that. And on the equity side, they want to see that the asset's going to be of value, that it's under a certain percentage for a house, buying an owner-occupier, which is not really what we're here for today, but that's 95%. In some cases, it will go to 97%, including insurance. For investments at major banks, it's 88% lent. Okay, plus insurance on top, so caps out at 90%, including insurance. Okay, so really it's around that. So the equity side and the income side are the major things, and obviously the history and the credit score. Have you been a good person? Are you making your payments? Did you pay your gas bill last month, etc.? So they'll look at that credit score. Someone like CBA will turn around on a credit score and decline your loan overnight. Okay, immediately as soon as you press the button. Okay, because the credit scores come up below what their criteria is.
And this is we get a miss with the last episode. This was, what is credit score? Because I still probably sit here. What exactly is entailed in your credit score?
Well, basically your history, your payments, your longevity of making payments to bills, to making payments to loans. And a lot of people don't understand this, but banks are talking to banks at all times. The score's out there for all banks to see. So in the old days, it's you can just go after another bank because a certain bank realised that payments have been missed, there's arrears, etc., etc. But the credit score is shared out there, and that is information that is common to all institutions that will stop you getting credit. So my advice out there to anyone out there, don't go in arrears, be in control of your payments, because that history will be on your credit score for a long period of time.
Now, I guess digging even further into that and talking about expenditures. Mm-hmm. So certain things that I see, things like Afterpay, Zip Pay, that obviously be treated like some kind of debt, right? There's repayments in that. And then what about things like HEX, even novated leases? Does that all count? Does that have
HEX is
impacts?
not on there, but everything else is. Anything to do with debt, HEX isn't on there, okay, which is interesting. HEX normally comes out of your salary.
Yep.
It's normally a debt that goes for a long, long time. I think the latest government that one gave a 20% discount that's still yet to come through. So we're waiting for that one to come through. Everyone's waiting for their HEX debt to drop down by a fifth. But yeah, all debts, credit cards, everything is actually scored. Okay, and it's very, very difficult to go to any major institution and get a loan if your credit score is below a certain figure. And that varies between institutions. And then your only options then are going to second and third tiers, where you're paying higher rates, high fees, and you're seeking loans from third-tier institutions, which are the go-to institutions when you can't get funding from the majors.
Okay, and then, on top of that, we're finance ready. We've spoken with our team. Mm-hmm. We've had a meeting with yourself. We understand what the lending side looks like, what they're looking for.
Yep.
What about what people can afford? A lot of people just ask how much I can borrow. That's obviously not always the smartest question, or is it?
It's not, definitely not. Borrowing capacity, as I mentioned before, borrowing capacity is a figure that, to me, is never mentioned or shouldn't be mentioned. And yet the banks will throw that number out there. Your borrowing capacity is X. Okay? Who cares what the borrowing capacity is? What's my profile? How do I sleep? How comfortable am I? How's it run? How much of my net income does it use? What are my plans? Can I run that in conjunction with running my big home loan payments on my home loan debt? What are my living expenses are? What is my income going to become? Or my family income? Have I got maternity leave coming on? Have I got a promotion coming through? Is my job secure? There's so much to it all. And a borrowing capacity is this number that everyone throws out there. And then people think they can go and get that loan. So it's about us being creative, or not creative even. It's about us understanding the customer, the holistic customer, and their goals and their plans and their strategies. And then linking that up with like the property advisor about where to buy, what to buy, how to buy, what amount, what's the cost to run the asset pre-post tax. And then we link all that together, and then we come to a solution in regard to what we can lend. So it's quite the opposite to reading a calculator that says, I can borrow $942,000.
Which, to put you kind of on the spot here, but let's just say you've got a client and they come to you and say, hey, Mark, I want to go buy this $800,000 property.
Yep. As an investment?
Yeah, as an investment, but what's your process with them from, maybe start to finish in terms of what are the questions you ask and what does that, session or sessions really entail?
Well, it's about understanding why they want to spend $800,000 and where do they want to buy that and how does it link in with their current situation and is there, do they have the ability to buy it? Okay, cash flow wise, not borrowing capacity, but cash flow wise. Is that asset the right asset? Hence we get Ripehouse involved. Okay, is it going to work to achieve the goals we need to achieve? And does it fit into the holistic strategy and then the exit strategy to get the certain profitability from that asset to help your financial position as a whole? So there's lots and lots of questions to be spoken about rather than I want to buy this house for $800K. And that's where I believe good brokers understand the wealth side, the tax side, the gearing side. We're not saying we're accountants. We're not saying we are financial planners. But if you don't understand that, you can't lend properly.
Yeah.
So we have to understand tax, cash flow, banking, financial planning, property, etc. Don't want to be a property advisor, that's your domain. But how do we link all that in so it actually is in alignment with what the client's trying to achieve? So normally in most cases, Julian, at the end, they don't want to buy that $800K property.
Yeah.
It was completely incorrect. And that's because they came up with I want to do this, but they didn't really understand what their goals and ambitions really were.
You touched on all of that there, which was probably one of my bugbears with, not to be discrediting other brokers out there, but sometimes I'll be dealing with a client and, they've researched location. I just want to buy in Melbourne, for example. So I want $800,000 for my loan.
Yep.
And I reference some brokers are just like waiters. You walk up to them, you place your order, they take your order. They're not going to challenge you. Are you sure you want the eggs Benedict this morning? They don't ask you about that.
Yep.
They'll just take your order and take it to the back and then it's served up to you when the reality is that person might have been sitting in front of them. Well, no, I actually wanted to buy 2 or 3 properties, but they've used all their servicing or most of their servicing on this one asset.
Yep.
And then they can't buy number 2 because they've left $200,000 or $300,000 on the table instead of being strategic with it. And then I guess the other thing on top of that as well is really, showing them the cash flow component in terms of all of a sudden they go out there and buy the $800,000 or $900,000 asset and they sit back and realize, oh boy, I've got myself in a bit of trouble here and I can't afford the cash flow side of things as well. So I think it's really, really important. If you're serious about building wealth through property, you don't just need a loan, you need a strategy. And that's exactly what the Australian Lending and Investment Centre delivers. Australia's most awarded brokerage. They're not just looking at what you can borrow, they'll build you a holistic lending plan tailored to your long-term goals. We use them, we trust them, and so do our clients. So to find out more or to book your complimentary lending strategy session, head to the link in the show notes to connect with the team. Thanks for listening. Now back to the video.
Well, that's where the customer's gone wrong. They've actually approached a partner or a professional service that is just really offering a rate and a product. And that's who they've gone to. So they've done nothing wrong. The customer comes to a broker that says, I want to borrow $800,000. Can I do that? They've done their job. They've done a great job. Yes, you can do that. And these are the terms and these are the rates and this is how it's structured. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, again, the customer hasn't got the right team around them to approach more of a strategist or someone who can actually really talk holistically about the longer term goals, the plans, what we're trying to achieve, what we're doing. So yes, it's out there. Yes, those brokers are doing a great job and they are answering the questions to the customer, but it's more about the customers back on getting the right team around them. Okay, if you're going to be an investment planner and you want to build a portfolio and you want to be a bit of a mogul and own 5 or 6 houses over a period of time, get the team around you that can assist to take you there.
You're right, because it is so important there. Like, it's not to, again, not to be disparaging by saying the way it is, but that's just the category that I try and say you're just taking the order, which they've done nothing wrong ethically.
No, nothing.
Or, they're not operating illegally or anything like that.
And they don't even understand what handcuffs they just put on that customer.
Well, that was where I was leading to.
They put a 30-year loan to them. They can't buy any other investments. They just bought that apartment in St Kilda Road worth $800K. They thought it was amazing. It was nice and shiny, but they've just absolutely extended their working career by 25 years, and they probably their net worth by a significant amount of money due to opportunity cost elsewhere. Yeah,
and that was kind of where I wanted to go with that, is in the sense that the strategy component and your goals, they all tie in together, because if you don't get that right at the beginning, and then you do have to backtrack and fix that,
Very expensive.
Very expensive, right? Property in Australia, we track record, $11 trillion industry, but the reality is you buy the property, the best part of 5% of costs to buy the property. You sell the property, 1.5% to 2% kind of minimum commissions to pay out, plus capital gains tax. Then you got to buy the next asset again. It's expensive to do that.
So back to reverse your mistake is expensive. So say it's a $1.5 million house, it's $90,000 to get in. Okay, so say you held it for a year, but you found out it was a mistake. Okay, so say $90,000. Say you used a buyer's advocate, it cost you $20,000. There's $110,000. You got your running cost for that. Say it was $1 million loan, you had 66% LVR. You got your milling cost. If you didn't have tenants in there because you were trying to do something with the asset, it might be a development or a renovation. You're probably talking about another $60,000 worth of interest there. So you're now down 100. What are you down now? 90, 20, 110, $170,000. Then you've got your sale cost of $30,000. There's $200,000 loss on the property if you get that wrong. So you can't afford to not get it right.
And we haven't even touched on opportunity cost, right? You bought it the wrong market because your strategy, there wasn't a strategy. It was like, I just wanted to buy in the suburb next to me because I can drive down there.
Well, if that asset was 2 assets out of south of Perth 3 years ago, you would have doubled your money, okay? And this one here, you've lost $200,000. So it might be a $1.2 million decision. And what that does to retirement and extending your career, and when you can retire, when you really control your life, is significant. And I'll see those errors every day. Every day. I've been doing this for, I've been doing investment lending interviews now for, at ANZ did it for about 6 years, 7 years, and then 15 years, so 21 years. And we see a lot of cases like that. That's that we see it as our job to correct that, ensure it doesn't happen, and try and fix the situation.
And I guess that's the last question I've got for you today when, finance and strategy meet. Because it's not really just about whether you can borrow, but another question I'd love for you to touch on is it's also about how you structure it. Can you maybe talk to us why structure really has a big part to play in your strategy?
Structure is really, really important because it might be around the cash flow of it, the ownership of it, how we re-gear it, or how we gear it, or then how we re-gear it. Or we might be setting up a structure where we're compounding interest, or we might be setting up a structure where we're developing, which is through trusts. It might be a structure where it's cash flow positive, where we want to distribute income because it's cash flow positive to beneficiaries. It might be we're developing but want to hold the cash in the trust and minimise our tax to use the extra funds to do further development. So there's so many different structures that we need to discuss and talk through. And that's not done just from our business. It's done from the accountant and us really aligning the conversation with the accountant and with us and getting that right from a tax and whatever the purpose we're trying to achieve is. So I believe structure is really, really critical. So in Victoria, a classic one is we'd buy a property in a percentage of ownership. Okay, so say you buy a house and you want to live there for 5 years but move out in 5 years but keep it in the portfolio as an investment because we know the market's about to turn around and things are about to improve. So why would you sell that now when the market's about to move after a fairly soft period? So what we'd do is 1 year before the 5-year period, we'd actually change ownership on that asset.
And can you maybe expand on that a little bit more? Because obviously there's probably the most common ownership structures out there are joint tenants and tenants in common. Maybe you mind expanding on that example?
Yeah, so you'd buy the property in 99-1, okay, or 100-0, not 50-50. Okay, so you've got the ability to re-gear an asset. So I've spoken a lot about reducing non-deductible and increasing deductible. So if you're going to move to a new house over here and move out of this one in 5 years' time, but turn it to an investment here, and then go and live in this one, you want that debt low, you want this debt high. So there's all ownership structures in regard to re-gearing. There's spousal laws under love and affection. There's all different ways to get the debt up. You can't just, and this is probably one of the myths I missed in the other podcast, the myth out there, probably the biggest myth, is not red money is dead money. The biggest myth is I can top up debt on an asset to claim the deductions on it. Okay. And of course the government's not going to allow that. Otherwise we'll all be topping up our investment debts as high as we can, claiming as much money as we can and asking for a $50,000 tax refund. So that's probably one of the biggest myths that we did miss. But it's all about you buying ownerships in certain ownerships to be able to buy an ownership off your partner using stamp duty and spousal laws to be able to do so. And in Victoria, the law is if you do a transfer of ownership, okay, I'm not the legal advisor on this, by the way.
Yep.
If you do the transfer of ownership 12 months beforehand to a spouse, there's no stamp duty payable. So that allows you to get the debt right on the one you're about to move out in 5 years to get the money lower in the future property. So if you've got a good accountant who understands gearing and is wealth oriented, they will talk about strategies like that we link into and obviously set up from our business.
And I guess maybe, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, because I hope I am articulating this correctly. So that might be somewhere where the most common way people buy property for in Australia is joint tenants, right? So husband and wife go out there and buy a property, joint tenants, you essentially have 50-50 ownership.
Yep.
Then you're going to move out of that property and you're going to change it to what's known as tenants in common, where you can have a percentage of ownership. And I guess in your example, what you're saying is if you know you're about to turn that into bad debt and you've got partner A who might be
turn it from bad debt to good debt.
Correct. So you got to go from bad debt to good debt.
Yep.
You're going to you got partner A.
Yep.
They're a stay-at-home parent.
Yep.
They're not earning any income or minimal income. But then you got partner B.
So you would buy it in the low-income earner.
Yep.
To start with. So this is about understanding. You never buy a house without strategically understand what the end goals are, which is back what I said earlier. Understand the goals here and let's work backwards. So you would buy it in the low-income earner. And the reason being, so the higher income earner can actually buy it off the low income earner in 4 years' time, 12 months before we move out.
And again, that's to then make sure that the higher income earner, who is at the highest tax bracket, is getting more deductions back when they're claiming their losses on the property.
Because it's been transferred to the higher income and now it's turned to an investment. You stay there 12 months to avoid paying stamp duty.
Yep.
Okay. And then from there, it's now in the higher income earner. Now, again, I must say that that is tax advice you need to check with your accountant on.
Not financial advice ever on the No B.S. podcast.
Exactly, but we can talk around it. We can't give the advice to do that, but we definitely send all our clients off to get sign off from the accountant. That comes back to us. We set up the structure accordingly. And then the client's got this house. The old house that was owner-occupied on a low debt is now a high debt. It's now deductible. You've now got rent coming from that property. The property's now in the higher income earner. We're claiming it through his tax, hopefully at the highest tax bracket of 45 cents on the dollar. We grab the money out of that and now we've got the next house, home loan, paid down significantly. So basically the structure back here, 8 years earlier or 6 years earlier, you've got to get that right to get this right. And most people wouldn't understand that.
And that's a really expensive mistake that people don't really zoom out on in terms of, we could be talking thousands of dollars each year.
Hundreds of thousands.
And if we're going to play that out in terms of a 10-year hold, 20-year hold, lifetime hold, whatever it might be, we're talking a whole property here that we're costing ourselves just in terms of actual dollar figures. So if you don't get it right, and this is the other thing that a lot of people don't understand in terms of your structures, particularly around ownership on the property and the strategy around that, you can't just flippantly decide to change that in terms of I've woken up today, I want my property from joint tenants to tenants in common or whatever it might be. You've got to pay sometimes, not always, but stamp duty again.
Some cases there's stamp duty, depending on the law and the state.
Yep.
There are ways to fix some of it, but the moral of the story, stop going in and buying houses with bankers or brokers and buying it in 50-50. Because what it does, it limits what you can do with that asset. And that just means that the people setting it up didn't really understand your strategic view of that asset. And that's how you should, basically, everybody should lend correctly to understand what the full plan is, longer term plan is, with each asset you own.
Fantastic, Mark, as always. And I guess to close things off for today's podcast, so if we tie it all together, being financially ready is more than just having a deposit. It's knowing your position, cleaning up your finances, showing stability to the bank, and borrowing smart, not just big. And then it's about strategy, structuring your finance in a way that supports your long-term goals. Mark, thanks again for joining me today. For anyone listening who wants to sit down and map out their financial readiness, we'll leave Mark's details in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in to the No BS Property Investing Podcast. We'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching. If you want to avoid underperforming acquisitions, grab our free suburb performance report below. It's packed with data we use every day to guide our clients.